A couple of sessions in this next period for the next hour, talking about digital load control and potential efficiencies, as well as the safety improvements from digitalizing the data performance for the IGHM565. There's also an element of ramp activities. Load control, the relationship with load control and ramp supervision is quite important. So we'll hear for a really impressive case study about potential efficiencies in digitalization. We're using load control and ramp activities to join in reconciliation. I'll say no more. What I'd like to do is welcome Massimo Cicchetti to the stage, the Head of Innovation and Efficiency here at IATA, to introduce the group and lead and moderate the session. Thank you. Massimo, please join us and introduce the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're gonna have a good lunch, a bit of a rest, and after lunch, usually you get sleepy, so we're gonna talk about load control, and most likely you're gonna sleep completely then afterwards. So this is one. So it's a great pleasure that I wish to introduce our two panelists, our two speakers. Adrian Kong, please come in on the stage. Adrian is a support manager load control at Emirates. And Tom Farncombe, Senior Manager, Engineering, Aircraft Engineer at Amadeus. Thank you. Our session today is called Faster, Safer, Better. So if we need to start to think about the three things, what would be the most important of the three? Safety. So where safety starts? So we in IATA, we have introduced a program called IDX, which collects all the data of all different types of data that are related to safety, about aircraft issues, ground damage, loading errors, and we're going to tackle that today with Adrian. And load sheet errors, or any type of other errors or load control that can pose severe risk to our operation. So for us in IATA, it is tremendously important that all the members and non-members contribute to this program and support us with their data and their events of safety that are from flight operation, maintenance, cabin safety. And if we don't have this information, this data from the industry, it becomes very difficult for us to address what are the main issues, and we can work out some solution. Luckily, we have now, this IDX is up and running. A lot of information, a lot of data are coming. We are reviewing together with our groups. We are reviewing what are the issues. We are trying to figure it out what could be the best solution. Today, we're going to display two implementations that has been performed together with our group, and also some implementation that Emirates move forward. We even not have yet tackled in IATA how can we simplify and reduce or mitigate loading errors. So with that, I hand over to Adrian Kong for the first part, where he's going to talk about the Emirates experience or dealing with loading error and how they have improved by digitalizing the way they communicate. Adrian, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be seeing everyone here. When Massimo sent me the rundown and we saw that we're running this session right after lunch, I thought, oh God, we're going to have everyone just sleeping throughout the whole session. So before I kick off, just a bit of a, energizer, okay? Just a show of hands here. Who here's worked in the commercial aviation industry for more than 10 years? Just show of hands, yeah? Great, pretty much the entire room, yeah? Who here's been here for 20 years? Jeez, okay. 30 years? 40 years? 50, 60, 70? Okay, all right. All jokes aside, but we at Emirates were thinking about something pre-pandemic, actually. We were thinking, you know what? What have we done about our experience, okay? What have we done about our service offerings? So what we see is this. Back in the 80s, we were flying jets like this, the 727s. We were getting from point A to point B, probably with multiple stop. These were the equipments that were, or the technology that was available at that point in time. Fast forward to today, what have we got? We're flying customers, 500 plus of them, in the comfort of the A380, pretty much non-stop from any point around the world. So technology with aircraft have made tremendous progress. So even looking about our customers on board our aircraft, our customers used to travel in first class like this, personal TV, probably the size of your smartphone, yeah? Who remember these kind of seats, yeah? And what do we got now? Our customers are flying in fully enclosed suites, virtual windows for the inboard customers aboard our Boeing 777. Again, direct non-stop from point A to point B. Okay, that's up in the air. What about on the ground? What about in the airport? What have we done? We used to have customers at traditional check-in counters, okay, handing over their tickets, the physical paper tickets. Who still remember those tickets with the red carbon, yeah, in the back? Yeah, of course, yeah. Once, you better wash your hands after, dealing with customers. So you were dealing with those check-in counters back then, those tickets. We then obviously move on to e-tickets for our customer. Today, we even have no-touch check-in, self-service backdrop where customers can use their app to check in and connect with the self-service backdrop that we have. Even the boarding pass that we issued used to be one of these ones, okay? Paper, they're all scrunched up always in the back pocket somewhere, and today we have them on the app. So when the challenge came to us in ground operations, what have we done since the 80s about the ramp? What have we done about aircraft loading? Well, my answer was, we stopped giving them one of these A3 piece of paper to go out to the aircraft and start loading. That's what we did. Yeah, okay, well, what about the next step? What do we do? Well, we started having these, EDP-produced LIR from our various systems, and yeah, they were still long. They were taller than me on a 777, that's for sure. Okay, I'm very short. So when it got to the millennium, we thought, we need to make a progress from this. And, we had A4 pieces of paper, so we downgraded from an A3 to an A4 now, so we're making progress. But it's still a piece of paper. It's a graphical representation of the aircraft hull, but it's still a piece of paper. And that's where we asked ourselves, what is our vision on the ramp? What do we want to see moving forward in the ramp across the globe? And especially when it's like this. This was like in Mexico City when we resumed operation post-pandemic. And no joke, it was flooding. The ramp was flooding with torrential rain. So we asked ourselves, what do we need to do to make the ramp a better environment for our people to work in? 3 principles. We want safety, efficiency, and we want green, okay? We want it to be environmentally friendly. With these 3 key topics in mind, we pursued a path of going down and having an electronic aircraft loading reconciliation application, which effectively serves as an electronic loading instruction report. With that, we came about and got one of the application, okay, that is out there on the market. So through that, you can see that users are able to interact with the application and progress towards communicating with load control, which for us, is a centralized load control operation in Dubai. What does that provide us? It provides real-time information of where our ULDs are, whether they're loaded on the aircraft or not, whether we had changed the loading position or not, directly from the aircraft side, whether it's on the other side of the world, immediately towards our load control operation in Dubai. More importantly, it increased visibility for the rest of our teams. The guys that are maybe in the cabin doing the turnaround coordination, waiting for the cleaning to be done, they can see what's happening downstairs through the phone, okay, through this application. So then we looked at it and said, where do we want this application where do we want these applications around the aircraft? At what touch points do we want to include in our aircraft turnaround, and what data do we want to gain out of it? So we decided that we needed to have it at the key major touch points. So we have our turnaround coordinator, who will be having a device, who will be having an application in hand. We'll have our loading supervisor, also having the application in hand. Of course, he's in charge of the loading activity of the flight. Last but not least, we also had our loaders, the ones that are physically maneuvering the ULDs into position, securing the ULD into position. So these three were the key touch points. We were able to obtain key data based on that. When a ULD arrives at the aircraft, okay, we have safety checklists built into the application so that whenever they're processing the ULD at that various stage of that loading process, they are prompted with safety questions. Have you checked the serviceability of the ULD? Have you checked whether the loads are secured within that ULD? Okay, have you checked the ULD information on that tag? Okay, ULD serial number, flight number, the date, the gross weight, whether everything has been included or not, the dangerous goods and special load condition of that ULD as well. So we were gathering a lot more information and prompting also our users to do these checks. And when those conditions weren't met, they were prompted to contact a certain person. So again, it was added levels of safety checks built into the application. Similarly, our loading supervisors were able to gather a lot more information about the baggage, where the bags were loaded, okay, across the different ULDs, okay? And more importantly was the loaders now also have that loading instruction. So who here has seen, and I see this all the time, I think everyone that works on the ramp must be a sign language expert, because it's always just hand signals and this and that, and between the guys that are on the apron with the guy that is up there on the cargo loader. So what we did was increase that visibility so that he or she that is up there on the high loader actually has that loading instruction in front of them and able to make transaction. Even better, load control sometimes needs to communicate with our frontline ramp team, okay? Maybe it's about holding the loading for a second, okay, for whatever purpose. Now, all the messaging that comes from our load control team goes to all of these stakeholders. So there's no more games of Chinese whispers. I'm Chinese, so I'm allowed to say that. Okay, so there's no more, load control wants this to happen, and then through translation error, whatever it is, misinterpretation. So we've come a very long way. I mean, we started this project back in 2018 when we first contacted our IT team to start looking at this. What have we got so far? 4 years down the line. We've now implemented this application at over 100 airports globally. This obviously includes the hub here in Dubai, and across the globe, we have more than 100 airports right now, where every single one of those three stakeholders I talked about are holding a device, performing transactions on this application. We've handled more than 200,000 flights during this period. This includes the cargo flights that we have done throughout the pandemic was handled on this application as well. Well, we talked about safety, we talked about, efficiency, we talked about being green. What are the results, Adrian? What are the results? We have reduced aircraft loading and load sheet errors by 70% throughout this 4 years. And these results are very much, it speaks for itself to our regulators as well, okay? And as we continue rolling this out across the world right now, which is still ongoing, I've got to admit, it's still ongoing, but as we roll this out across the rest of the world, we're seeing this rate, 70%, continually increasing. And when I say loading and load sheet error, these are even minor ones, okay? This is just maybe talking about the ULD just being in the wrong position. That includes those. We've also reduced delays related to aircraft loading by 40%. We saw time and time again where, especially for flights that were complicated, could be waiting for late inbound connection, where we used to be making 4, 5, 6 edition of the loading instruction report simply to adjust ULDs or change positions. Those are all communicated instantaneously. No longer does the turnaround coordinator or anyone need to run to a printer, run to a computer, and print a paper copy of the loading instruction for the rest of the team. Easily, 5 minutes saved every single time we change a loading instruction report. We have saved more than 1.5 million pieces of A4 paper since the rollout of this application. And I think this is very much, we would say, it's a benefit that we didn't expect. But as we were running through the numbers, we started realizing, hang on, because we were starting to see where we file store our flight files, we're starting to see, seems to be we can fit more and more in there. Okay, it's either the room got bigger or we're using less paper. So the latter was correct. We were using less paper, and it's been backed up 1.5 million pieces of paper since the initial rollout. We've also improved access management to over 10,000 ground operations personnel we have globally, okay? So it used to be that if you tell me that, oh, there's a David Smith that's working in Birmingham, I would have no idea who this person is. I'll be like, I can't really see, what he's done or when was the last time he handled an Emirates flight. But now, all that data is available. So if you tell me that there's a David Smith in Birmingham, I can just simply pull up the profile and go, oh, all right, yeah, he handled a flight with us last week, okay? The loading record and signatures are stored electronically, and it's something that's been very well supported by our regulator. So no longer do we require all the signatures to be on a piece of paper. All the signatures are done electronically and filed electronically as well. And we're also able to support an automated data analysis and loading performance, so we can track the overall performance from certain stations on certain particular flights and go, oh, all right. And it supported our data analysis team in highlighting what the issues are, do their trend analysis, and allowed us to work closer with our service provider to address issues that they may have flagged before, but were not supported by any supportive data. So 4 years of work, this is where we're at right now. What's next? Okay, that's what I always ask, what's next? We're looking at developing the inbound loading reconciliation to support the ULD and baggage tracing. Okay, so I know currently a lot of airlines, you already have a little, through your app, it tells you whether your bag's loaded on the flight or not. What we want to also build is telling the customer, we've unloaded your bags already, okay? On top of that, it helps with our transit flights, being able to reconcile each unit one by one on the inbound sector and telling the user which ones must remain on board. And we're looking at building a sequential logic into the unloading and the loading operation. Who here operates an aircraft that maybe the weight and balance is not that stable, especially on the ground, where you need ballast and all that, yeah? So this loading and unloading sequence logic will help determine which unit should come out first in order to maintain ground stability, okay? And also pretty much stopping any, potentially inaccurate transactions being made. So if you're a user on the ramp and you unload something that's in the middle of the aircraft as the first unit coming off, the app will tell you, that's not the right one, okay? That's not the first one to come off. The first one to come off is at the door. So this is what's happening. And to be honest, I think looking at the application itself, and just like how I told Massimo, I think, there's no limit to this. We can develop this a whole lot more to digitalize our aircraft loading and having pretty much an ELIR. And this is where Emirates is going, and we're reaping the benefits out of it with all those stats we've had across safety, efficiency, and also being environmentally friendly. So our journey continues as we work very closely with our partners to further develop the application. I would like to use this opportunity to thank my colleagues at Emirates and also our service partners across the world, because without your support, we would not have been able to roll out such an impressive project. And as we continue to develop, we look to all of you guys for your support along the way. Thank you very much. for your time today.
Please, Adrian, that is quite an impressive presentation. So I like that you're starting to mention something that we still don't have in our standards, so which is ELAR. So I was looking forward to see if we as a group that we are working in GAD and load control ever since a few years, Tom is longer participant in that, can start to think instead, in fact, to do a standard that can be used by any type of tool, because you might fly in many different type of airports, and then you might end up in having service provider that Emirates required to have certain tools, another line required to have a certain tool, having a standard in place, whatever tool they use, there's a standard communication connected between your central load control and let's say your whatever station, your loading supervisor or team. So what are your views on that? Do you think it's going to be, in your opinion, this could be a priority for us to
Definitely should be. I mean, the standardization of ELIR will help both system developers and carriers to determine what we do moving forward. It is probably the best way. I think that the stats, even from an environmentally perspective, speaks for itself. 1 point something million pieces of A4 paper, that's a huge carbon footprint, I would say, as a carrier. So moving forward, as more carrier and more system provider explores the option of the ELIR, it is definitely in everyone's interest that we do proceed with standardizing the ELIR format.
Thank you so much. So we will have more time at the end of the session for question and answer to Adrian. In the meantime, I wish to hand over to Tom Farncombe, and just now we are moving towards from a loading part to instead how do we set data into a departure control system. And just to go back to the safety, in 2018, the FAA issued a safety alert, 18012, where they were concerned that quite many incidents happened with certain operators because their data that were introduced in the DCS were either corrupted or not correct, and some incident happened on the matters. So we have started to work quite a long time ago trying to solve the problem, but I'm not going to talk all about it. I will leave to Tom to start to recap the journey we made on that particular project. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks very much, Massimo. So we're going to look at the journey of the last 5 years for the AHM565 XML. I always think back to when I was about 5 years old, which was a very long time ago. My mother told me, if you're going to create a story, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so this kind of follows quite well. I'm going to tell you a story. We've got quite a nice ending, so it's not a bad one. And the story starts 5 years ago. So if we could go to the slides, please. So the ending is that this is alive now. The AHM565 is alive. We've got a concept from 5 years ago that we've transformed into a good idea and then into a very complex technical solution, and then a deployment that is easy. So the point of this is the success is in its ease for the industry, although we are dealing with some very complex flight safety critical data. So the point of all of this is to get information from one place to another with as little human intervention as possible, from one set of experts, who are the people that design and build the aircraft, to another set of experts, who are the people that consume that data, which are DCS organizations or departments within an airline or a company. So the problem that we've had over the years is that this has been a very slow and cumbersome issue with getting the data into a system in an optimized and a speedy kind of a way. And so this is the start of the story here. At the IGHC 5 years ago in Bangkok, we made a presentation with a concept that we have of what we wanted to do. And we can see there was a slide that we showed there that shows the old kind of process, which is a very slow and expensive kind of thing to do. And we start with the manufacturer's data. They provide the airline with some manuals, some technical manuals. So for load control, this is the weight and balance manuals. The airline's engineers or engineering contractors then take all of that data out. They kind of reorganize it all, and in many cases, they degrade it or de-optimize it for safety purposes, and there's good reasons for doing that, but again, it's not optimal. It means that takes away some of the capability of the aircraft in terms of how you're going to make money with it, with payload and so on. That information is then transferred into a set of data sheets, so the old AHM560 and AHM565 physical data sheets, which are then transposed across to a database analyst who would then enter the data into a DCS database. So we start with the data in a database at the manufacturer's factory. It comes out of that database, goes into a document. It comes out of that document, it goes into another document, and from that document, it goes back into another database. This is really done with documents like PDF, Word, Microsoft Word documents and things like this. It's really not an efficient process. And again, I think one of the themes that we've looked at in the last couple of days is that we're kind of being a bit left behind with technology here, and there's a possibility or a potential here to correct that now. So we can sweep all this away, and with this magical AHM565 XML file, what's the difference here? A lot of people are a little scared of this because it kind of takes flight safety critical data and just makes magic happen. But it's as simple as that. We're going to take all of those old processes and just import the data directly from the manufacturers in an IATA standard so that it doesn't matter which manufacturer of the aircraft is defining the data. For you as ground handlers, ground service providers, and airlines, you can have a standardized form of data. It doesn't matter what DCS provider you're using. This data should be in a shape that you can just consume it and use it as it is. So the story, as it goes, the beginning of the story, as I said, 5 years ago, we started the conception of this project at the IGHC in Bangkok. The key players of this are myself, obviously, from Amadeus, our colleague Carol Tavernier from Reconcentra, and also Boeing and Airbus colleagues as well. In the GAD group, we have kind of designed this together, we've validated it together, and so on. We've done a lot of analysis over the 5-year period. We eventually got to the point of design, and then kind of stress testing that design to make sure it really is a suitable standard for all kind of organizations. And then finally, in the last year or so, we've been busy writing implementation material and so on, and that is now published in the latest AHM. So the schema for the XML is there, and all the useful information to guide people publishing the data in this format, and also people consuming the data in this format. So we've been doing this all over the world, and we've been really quite busy with this. It's quite an amazing technical outcome. It was quite a challenge, and we were not 100% sure we could achieve it. So 2022, here we are, and we're ready now to really go live with this. So the next challenge is to kind of change the thinking in the industry, to get people away from the old PDF type of data exchange and get them into this kind of format. So just as a recap then, so in the old way of doing things, the manufacturer would produce a document, then the airline would receive that document. They might spend 20 or more days analyzing it with their weights engineers and so on, and reformatting that into a kind of a format or a shape that aligns to the DCS technology that they're using. They create their own data sheets, which are then passed on to a data analyst who might take up to 5 days, perhaps, to hand enter that data into that specific database. And these, in a kind of fully functioning departure control system, are probably conservative numbers. In reality, it could be much more than this. So also bearing in mind that these are very high-cost resources to the specialists that are doing this. So it's a very expensive process. So the new process with the AHM565, we can take this data, have it published from the manufacturer, and within 1, 2, maybe 3 minutes, we import it. Not only import it, but we can create flights for our low control operation almost instantaneously. So we just take the data from the manufacturer, and we put it straight into the system, and we use it immediately. I'm sure many of you with the ground handling business are frustrated when DCS is not available because the system is not ready. It's a very uncertain business. It's very unpredictable. We don't know what's going to come over the fence. So when something does come that you're not expecting and you have to quickly react to the DCS to be ready, here's your answer, the AHM565 data file. You can have it instantaneously. So it's absolutely real. I just want to replay that again because it really is that incredible. We're going from 25 man days plus down to literally seconds to do this. So what I want to do now, if we can go to the desktop, I'm going to try and demonstrate how quickly and easy this process is to enter a file that I've received from the Airbus factory. So Airbus have sent to me an AHM565 that was straight from the manufacturer, so exactly like the manufacturer's weight and balance manual. We're going to use a kind of human interface, which is a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, so that you can see that data, so you can visualize exactly what that data looks like, rather than looking at the XML file, which is very kind of computer language and very techy and not very user-friendly. So when we receive the file, in this spreadsheet, which we will deploy with the AHM, you'll be able to open a file, and in this case, we'll find the file that I've received from the Airbus factory. So this XML file, we can open this, import it into the spreadsheet. This XML file is about 100,000 lines of text, and as I said, it's quite un-user-friendly. So unpacking that file into this Excel spreadsheet, you'll be able to navigate through it, look at different things, and also add your own information. So we receive the information from the manufacturer. As an airline, you will, of course, have your own operational information, or as a ground service provider, perhaps you might also have your own information. That could be standard passenger weights and so on, or catering weights, or something like that. So you will have the ability, through this spreadsheet, to add your information into it, and then recompile the file to import into the database. So this is unwrapping at the moment. It includes everything, as I said, from the weight and balance manual. What you're seeing at the moment is all of the lock information from the weight and balance manual, which is normally too complex for people to even bother with in DCS. So all of that kind of information will be available. Importantly, too, I'm talking today very much in the context of weight and balance and load control, but DCS is obviously much bigger than that. This file also includes all of the seat map data, passenger handling type data for seat allocation and so on. So everything you need to set up your check-in system in DCS, it's all in this file as well. So what can I say? It really is the one-stop. So here we now have what we see. It's an Airbus A330-900 that Airbus have sent me. The data is all complete in here. We've even built some nice little tools in here so that you can click on certain buttons and it will give you graphical representations of your data. So if you're an engineer or a technical person maybe in an airline, you can go to this kind of information to see what Airbus or Boeing or whoever has actually sent you. So from that, we can make some modifications to that data if we want to. And when we've made our modifications, we can then rewrite the file. So again, another little feature in the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to save that data back into the XML format. And that's now rewriting that file for me, recompiling it. So I may have added some pantry codes or something like that into it. And we'll see that the pop-up here tells me that it's written everything, and it gives me the option to give it a name to save. So in this case, I'm going to use this name that it's prompted for me. I'm going to save that, and then very bravely, I'm going to try and enter that into the Amadeus Altéa Flight Management Departure Control System. So firstly, we'll bring up the database. So this is the Amadeus Altéa FM database, and we can see here on this that here we've got a kind of browser to tell us all the different aircraft that have been configured for this particular airline code. And so I've got a repository here for the A330neo, but at the moment we can see there's nothing against it. There's no data in here. If I click on this, I don't see anything. I have a feature here to import a file. So I now press on the browse here and find that file that I've put into the system, and I'll look for a folder which I created under IGHC Paris. And I can see here, this is the file that I've just taken from the Airbus factory, modified, recompiled, and now I can import that file into the Amadeus database. So I press the apply button. I'll give this an effective time of perhaps 1600 this afternoon, and apply that, confirm. And now this data is being imported. This is the whole Airbus A330-900 weight and balance manual importing into the Amadeus system, and we can see it is all here now. So if I switch this data on and apply this, the data is now live in the system and ready to use. It's as simple as that. There's no PDF files, there's no language issues with badly written documents and so on. It's all just really comes straight from the manufacturer's factory. And we can see if we browse through the database, you'll see all of this kind of information. Here's a summary of the hold information. All of this is drawn directly from the Airbus data. So then I can go to the Altair Flight Management load control system. And on this screen, so this is the screen that the load controller would normally see. And in this panel, there would be a list of all the flights that are operating for this particular airline. At the moment, we see nothing. So we have a feature to now create a flight. So I can go to this little pop-up, create a flight, and put in my flight number. Let's call this 6X980. And it's going to be a flight operating this evening. And it's going to be from, let's say, Helsinki to London Heathrow, departing at perhaps 22 and arriving local at perhaps 23. And then if we want to kind of connect this up to the check-in system, we'll put some more information in here to allow that to happen. The types of passenger flight. Then we put in some details for the seat map. And finally, if we have a if we have a registration already, we can also add that. And then we create the flight. And now we can see the flight exists in DCS. And when we look at that, we can see all the data. We can now just process this as a normal flight and load control. Remember, this is I don't want to sound too much like a salesman here for Amadeus, but the Altair Flight Management System is an extremely advanced load control system. It has functions to do just about everything you could ever do in terms of weight and balance. Many users of this system use less than 40% of the power of the product simply because they cannot create all of the data in the background. So everything's here and all ready to go. So that's the flight create process. It really is as simple as that. We've gone from the Airbus factory to a live flight in a matter of minutes. So just to finish up, if we could go back to the slides, please. So just to summarize here, what we've just done, we've taken this data and so we've taken the data, we've created the flight, and we could then do a validation. So it could be that you maybe once the data's been put into the system, you need to kind of check that it's correct. You don't perhaps take it blindly from the manufacturer. That's a discussion for another day. We hope to get to that point where we can do that. One step at a time. This is flight safety critical data, so we will impose a whole list of checks that we can do either manually or some that we can start to do in an automated kind of a way. And what we can see here is that in my database, I can export that data into the XML file. And perhaps I can do an automated kind of overlay of the source data that I originally received from the manufacturer to ensure that it is identical to what we received in the first place. So rather than having a human checking numbers on a screen against a PDF document, you know that old story where commas and full stops get confused, 8's become 3 when you're tired. Humans are not good at this. And this is a huge amount of data. So if we can automate this process, then we go even better into the whole aspect of flight safety and efficiency. Not only that, we can also take these files and periodically check it. So the data may be resident in the database. For some reason, an update was issued that did not propagate through to the DCS operator or the airline's DCS department. And in that case, we could have out-of-date data. We can automate this to perhaps every day or at every time a flight creates, we can cross-refer back to the published data from Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, whoever it might be, so that we can get that information and confirm that it is absolutely correct and current on a real-time basis. And that's very exciting too, and that's something that I would really love to see as the next step of what we do. So if everything lines up with what's been published, then we can automatically switch the system on. If these automation processes identify variations, then we can inhibit the system to not allow it to process and produce perhaps erroneous or load sheets, loading instruction reports, and so on, using data that is just really completely out of date. So that's an exciting process of where we can go. And just as a kind of a background, I am actually doing something very similar to that today in the Amadeus system. With thousands of different aircraft records, we do a kind of gross error check because at the moment, we don't have any of these fantastic new data files. This is a new concept. As you can see, it works, but now we've got to encourage the industry to uptake on this technology, get it really involved in it, and to start using it. Most importantly, in my opinion, is we need to get the aircraft manufacturers to push it out to us. They're really the source of this information, and we can do some really fantastic stuff with that. So not only will we have load control in three minutes, as we showed, we would also have safety and quality checks that we can go through. So what's next? 2022. It's really exciting. We're here, 5 years down. We've gone through the start of the story. We've had this big part in the middle. We're at the end of the story in terms of creating this fantastic thing. But now we have to move it on. And we really, really want people to get excited about this and want to use it. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've created some implementation guidelines and some material to demystify the process, to help you understand what it is and the power that you can get from this. And also for the technical people involved in perhaps creating the data and creating the data files, which would be the manufacturers perhaps, and the consumers of that data, which would be the DCS providers. All of the information they need to work out how to use these data files is in this very comprehensive manual that we've spent a huge amount of time putting together and reviewing across manufacturers, DCS providers, airlines, ground service providers, and so on. So we've had a lot of input from a lot of people on that. The next part, I think Massimo has some good ideas about doing some webinars, some training sessions, perhaps some familiarization sessions to start with. So look out for this. I think we'll probably publish something at some point to get people thinking AHM, XML, automation of this data. Okay, so we're going to get rid of this old way of doing things. That's all history now. We don't need to do it this way. In fact, this way, apart from being particularly inefficient, We see a huge amount of old data going back, even IGHC22 that some of you, if you've been involved in DCS database management, will know about from the very early days of my career. It's still floating around. It's a very poor way of exchanging this information in this current age with technology. So we move from these 25 days to 3 minutes. It's a huge, huge saving. I did a quick analysis just before I came to the conference on the DCS database of Amadeus, and I did an estimation, which I really believe is a conservative one, that all of the data in there, considering the efforts of all the weights engineers and all the different airlines that are using that system, and the people inputting the data based on these 20 days of analysis and 5 days of inputting, it came to something like about 230 man-years of expert resources. That's a huge expense to the industry. I then looked at our 3-minute concept here. It's not totally accurate, but it's probably a good guide. And I came up with a number somewhere between 5 and 10 years. So there's a saving here of over 210 man-years of incredible, expensive effort here. So it really should sell itself. And that's before we even start talking about the accuracy and the safety of it. So thank you very much for that. I hope you see the value in this and want to explore this. And if you want to talk further about it, then feel very free to discuss it with us. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for the amazing presentation and from 25 days to 3 minutes up and running. So the question I want to ask you is that all this is okay for a DCS provider, so you save a lot of time, a lot of efforts. What is for the airline? We are at the end an airline association, so what is the benefit for the airline in moving towards this type of work?
It's most importantly, it's flight safety, in my opinion. I'm a little biased on this. I've worked in accident investigation early in my life, and I'm really passionate about this subject. It affected me profoundly with the investigations I was involved in, and I see a lot of poor quality data floating around the industry today. Now, I don't want to criticize people that are creating this data. That's not my point at all. Everybody's doing the best they can. But there is not really a need for people to struggle to do this anymore. We can take this data directly from the source and use it where we need to use it without involving people that are perhaps imposed to do it. So firstly, obviously safety. Clearly the time, the effort, and the expense of analyzing, modifying data, changing the shape of it and putting it into the systems is also a huge cost, a huge cost. And beyond that is the readiness of the systems. These systems have to be ready, whether it's a check-in system, that part of departure control system, or weight and balance. Without these now, without this automation, we cannot be efficient. We cannot get the best out of our aircraft. We cannot realize the good, optimize the best payloads and so on. So for the airlines, this is, to me, is a huge benefit.
Thank you. Also, what we want to say is that our process was create, first of all, the XML schema, the implementation guideline, and the Excel spreadsheet that Tom has displayed that is an engineered Excel spreadsheet, which is the initial interface we want to plug in, will be available in the next edition of AHM. There's still a bit of testing about some things. There's a couple of aircraft that are still creating, we will need maybe to introduce a couple of new rules to cover the entire fleet that is around, and then will be available for our member airline, importing the data, having the data displayed the same way Tom was displaying, will be available in AHM, and we will do webinar and things. So with that, I want to open to question and answers from our crowd here. If there's any question from Adrian on the ELAR, the way they've done, or to Tom in the load control piece. Please, this gentleman.
Hello, good afternoon. I would like to ask Mr. Adrian, out of the Emirates experience, what are the challenges that you faced or you managed to overcome through the transmission period from the conventional load control processes to using the app? And what are the challenges that you're still facing using this application?
That's a very good question. I think the biggest challenge we had faced along our journey towards getting to where we are now initially was the buy-in. We faced a lot of resistance from a lot of frontline personnel who may not be very familiar. At the end of the day, when I showed you that slide, we did move from an A3 to an A4, and now we've moved from an A4 to a tablet. So for a lot of the ramp staff, it was a very uncomfortable change. Second of all was the acceptance of changing that from a lot of the sign language communication and changing that communication through messaging and through that device itself. But I have seen a drastic change. For example, one of the first stations that we have implemented this application, the airport manager came back to me 2 years later through one of our management conference, and he said, if you were to remove this application from my station, there will be a riot at the airport, okay? Great statement, absolutely love it, okay? But it's about getting through that initial challenge of moving from a paper towards a device. What we also saw was that a lot of frontline staff were uncomfortable with that initial change, and they were still holding a piece of paper with them, maybe in the back pocket, and started using that, but still every now and then picked up from the pocket and have a look. But as you progress through, maybe a month or 2 months after we implemented, that's where we saw, they've started, not printing the LIR from the pocket, so they're now trusting that device itself, and the reliability of it speaks for itself. Because once they see that instantaneous changes made by load control or made by other users are being displayed on their device, that's where they go, okay, this is the right way moving forward. This is live information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, please. Just a second, let's wait for the mic is coming so everyone can hear your question. Thank you so much.
So that was pretty impressive when you showed the electronic version for the LIR, etc. Now, what I was wondering was, on your slide, it said 70% and 40%. Those figures are in my mind. So I was just curious, when you did the risk mitigation for this kind of change, how did you mitigate the balance errors? Like, what is the highest risk that you got? And what was the risk of this change of technology, replacing the old way of doing it?
So the biggest risk we had was that we had enabled the application to allow users on the ramp to make certain changes. So for example, you simply needed to change 2 pallets, swapping the 2 pallets or swapping 2 AKEs, which happens, depending on the loading sequence. We allowed our users to change that. So through the business rules that was developed in the application itself, it runs all the checks and balances so that you're not exceeding any weight and balance limitation as we have in the IGHM565. You're not exceeding or not having any dangerous good or special loads segregation issues. So it runs those checks at every transaction that we do. So along the way, even though we've provided that flexibility for the ramp users to make those changes, any changes that was going to drastically impact on the safety, such as that, would immediately seize the application, stopping the user from proceeding, and alert the load controller, who sits in Dubai, and kind of give them a call and say, hey, what's happened here? So whereas we encourage users on the ramp to load as smoothly as possible and follow whatever we have, this application has that added level of safety so that when they do make changes, it does tell them if something is about to go wrong.
So we have 3 questions that our audience has asked through the application, through the app of our networking tool. So 2 are for Tom. Is the electronic IGHM565 applicable only to Amadeus DCS?
Actually, there's 2 systems now that have it, and the other one is the Raconcentra system, Sable, which is quite interesting too, because that system specializes more in the freighter business. And it actually proves how versatile this data file is, that it runs across all sorts of different types of operation and different types of aircraft. So it's coming alive. Yeah.
But if I understood correctly, the question is that the standard is applicable to any DCS. So it's just, having you to programming an interface that can transmit the data from the standard to your DCS, because everyone, as my understanding, set the data in their DCS system in a different way. So Altea is different from...
This is absolutely the power of it, yeah, that your DCS provider, if they can handle this type of file, then you have that ability to be flexible with what you're doing. So having the IATA standard there makes everything so much simpler for absolutely everybody.
Second question is, what about the capability of processing an AHM in DCS providers that are currently available in the market? Any standard that all DCS providers to follow? I can respond this one. So we have the standard in AHM, the implementation guideline in AHM. We're going to publish the interface into the AHM. So we have a complete toolkit, and we're going to start in Q3, Q4, some session. We have to agree together with our members how to create something that have different type of audience. Unallied audience is different from more technical DCS provider audience. We will try to dedicate session for each type of user for what they need to do. And this is going to be live in Q3, Q4. Last question is for Adrian. Does the app have the option to the staff to access applicable procedures of Emirates?
Yes, so it does have the feature for the staff to access the loading procedures of Emirates. Obviously, we won't cover the entire ground ops manual in the application because it's quite too big. So if they're looking for other things such as de-icing, refueling, then they have to go back to their manual. However, loading related procedures are in the application.
So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining this session. And before closing, I wish to congratulate to Amadeus, Altea, to have been the first DCS implementing our IATA standard, and 391 airlines will benefit of the work that Tom has put together within the group and within his own company to make this one happen together with the group from the standard perspective, and also a lot of work to integrate a very complex DCS of Amadeus with our standard. So I wish to congratulate with Tom. Sean, if you can please bring, we have prepared a little takeaway with that. You owe me $15 for the certificate holder, which is purely plastic crap. Couldn't find anything better, but I hope that is at least, it's this.
Well done, Tom.
Congratulations again, and we have bite a little bit of time, but we start late, so I, again, want to close with that. Without data and without an understanding of the safety things, we kind of really need people to work to us and give us data. Please, Tom, move a bit in the front, and he's going to take me more of a picture. Sean, please join us.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. There's a couple of things I'll take away from that. I'm chairman of the GAG Group working with you guys. So there's a couple of things I'd like to say. Once my colleagues take a picture, I'll step back. Digital is here. And we, in standards, low control under wing, we're actually taking advantage of that digital opportunity now. But there's one other theme. I think Adrian led it best, if I'm honest. I'm very proud to work with this group. Very proud to work with the people I'm with. And there's a few other of us here as well. And we're doing things with purpose and passion. And we are doing. But I'm not just proud to work with these gents and all the other colleagues. I'm proud to be with you. I'm proud to work with you because together, with the people, with purpose, with passion, we get it done. And we are continuing to get it done. So that's what I'd like to sum it up. Well done, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Well done. OK, so just before we break for tea, I think it's ready for tea. The next session is actually a technical session for the auditors. which I'll announce in a moment. But I'd just like to stop for a moment. We have a small video provided to us, an informational piece provided to us by Saudi Ground Services. So just before we break for a tea, coffee break, I'd like to show the video from SGS. Saudi Ground Services have a small informational piece they'd like to show us. And if I can have the piece, that'd be cool. Okay, thank you. Small video from SGS, information about Saudi Ground Services.